Hello, welcome to Heady Remarks. It's July 30th, 2022. I know it's dim. I like it like that. So I'm going to leave it. Archie's right here. And I'm going to talk about Charles Lindbergh. He was a person, an American, who had the middle name Augustus. And shit, I forgot to... I'm an idiot. Hold on, I forgot to share the link. Let's do that. Gotta invite people. I'm so nervous. God, this sucks. I'm like really just nervous lately. It's hard to do. Okay, there. Okay. Whew. Okay, so there was a contest if you could fly from New York to Paris or from Paris to New York, you would win $25,000. Hello, Dungeon Simp, formerly known as Doodle Squatch, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly. Welcome, hello. I'm talking about Charles Lindbergh. So he won the contest. I believe like 6 people died trying to win that contest, trying to fly that flight. You could go either way, from New York to Paris or from Paris to New York. And he did it. He had, I think, like 2.5 sandwiches or something. I forget. Maybe it was 3. Why would it be half? He had some sandwiches. He only ate like 1.5. Maybe that's what I'm remembering. So... he did it, and it made him instantly famous. His life changed when he landed in Paris. There were like, he was confused by the lights because there were so many people there. Hello, tribal defender. Made it to the party. Happy to see you. So, yeah, he's sort of a shy person, Lindbergh. You know, he wasn't really meaning to be like a leader type. He just kind of was thrust into it because he was suddenly extremely famous. Such short notice for your streams. I know. I literally hit go live before I remembered to share it. Because it was just suddenly 7 p.m. and I was like, go! Okay, so he was, how old was he when he did that? Single engine Ryan monoplane, the Spirit of St. Louis. That's the name of his plane. And he's from Minnesota, and his mom was a chemistry teacher, and I think his father was a politician, possibly? U.S. Congressman from Minnesota, Charles August Lindbergh, was his father. So his name's Charles August Lindbergh, and the flyer guy I'm talking about, his son was named Charles Augustus Lindbergh. So, yeah, son of prominent U.S. Congressman from Minnesota. He was raised mostly in Little Falls, Minnesota. Became an officer in the U.S. Army Air Corps Reserve in 1924, earning the rank of second lieutenant in 1925. Later that year, he was hired as a U.S. airmail pilot in the greater St. Louis area. I believe, am I remembering this wrong? It said that the airmail pilot, 75% fatality rate? That's a lot. That's pretty crazy. So he's like a daredevil. He's like a shy, kind of soft-spoken. His voice, I have some of his voice. You can hear it. It's like, it's not a low voice. It's like, I don't know. It's not like the greatest speaker. He started to prepare for his historic 1927 transatlantic flight. He was hired as a U.S. airmail pilot in that same area where he started that flight. He received the United States' highest military decoration from President Calvin Coolidge, the Medal of Honor, as well as the Distinguished Flying Cross for his transatlantic flight. The flight also earned him the highest French Order of Merit, civil or military, the Legion of Honor. His achievement spurred significant global interest in both commercial aviation and airmail, which revolutionized the aviation industry worldwide, described then as the Lindbergh boom. And he devoted much time and effort to promoting such activity. He was honored as Time's first Man of the Year in 1928, was appointed to the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics in 1929 by President Herbert Hoover, and was awarded a Congressional Gold Medal in 1930. In 1931, he and French surgeon Alexis Carrel began work on inventing the first perfusion pump, which is credited with making future heart surgeries and organ transplantation possible. Wow. Okay, so here's where his son's born. March 1st, 1932, Lindbergh's infant son, it just goes right to the kidnapping. Charles Jr. was kidnapped and murdered in what the American media called the crime of the century. The case prompted the United States Congress to establish kidnapping as a federal crime. If a kidnapper so it wasn't FBI. The FBI couldn't really get involved because it wasn't a federal crime. And I don't know, it's weird. I guess we'll get into it. But the hysteria surrounding the case had driven the Lindbergh family into exile in Europe, from where they returned in 1939. Yeah, so when they left, he was like so insanely famous that their lives were basically in danger. Obviously, they already knew that. I mean, some people try to accuse him of killing the baby, but I really don't think he did. You know, it's kind of stupid. Like, the people talking about him now are like, he liked to do pranks. So he probably killed his baby. Like, I don't know. Some of the I've known people that do pranks, and yeah, they're annoying and stuff, but I mean, I don't know. Maybe I should play a video. How about that? Is this it? History brief. Let me see. We'll do this one. Hopefully I'm allowed. This is where it starts. It's basically where it starts.
Initially, the New Jersey State Police believed the kidnapping had to be an inside job. And right off the bat, they found it suspicious that the kidnapper knew the exact location of the baby's room. The Lindbergh's home was new, and parts of it were still under construction when the kidnapping occurred. The family had not even officially moved in, and at that point, they were only spending weekends there. But the kidnapping happened on a Tuesday evening, and who else but someone on the inside would know that the family remained after the weekend due to the baby's bad cold. According to Anne Morrow Lindbergh, the only people who knew were her own parents and one of her parents' housemaids, who often cared for the baby. The only other people who knew the family's whereabouts that evening were little Charlie's nanny and the Lindbergh butler, who were themselves inside the house. Police immediately noted that the baby's nursery had been wiped clean of fingerprints, even those that should have been there, including those of the baby and his parents. As the case evolved over the next few days, police and other investigators determined that Charles Lindbergh was maintaining control of the investigation and may have ordered the cleaning of the crime scene.
That is weird. Why would he do that? May have? What do you mean, may have? Come on. There's a lot of this.
More eerie Lindbergh baby circumstances concerns the fate of Lindbergh household.
So a lot of people, because of he was really vocal about not wanting to enter World War II. And so in hindsight, a lot of people now are like, you know, they call him things, they accuse him of things, and they're like, oh, it's like, take a closer look at him because he might be hiding stuff. Or, you know, they disagree with his political opinions that he had back in the day, and now they try. I don't know. I think it's a little unfair.
Until the sole official suspect, Bruno Richard Hauptmann, was arrested, authorities rigorously and repeatedly questioned members of.
Okay, so this guy, Bruno Richard Hauptmann, whatever. How did they say it? I don't know. Let's replay it, maybe.
The Lindbergh household staff repeatedly questioned. Richard Hauptmann was arrested.
Hauptmann.
Authorities rigorously and repeatedly questioned members
He's
of the
innocent.
Lindbergh household staff. Chief among these was Violet Sharp, a woman who was in the employ of Anne Lindbergh's parents as a housemaid. Since Anne, Charles, and their baby were not only frequent visitors to the Morrow home, but were actually also living there while their new home was built, Sharp was regularly pressed into the service of caring for the Lindbergh baby. Indeed, Sharp was one of only a very few who knew that the family would remain at the new home prior to the baby's disappearance. And this is why she was at the top of the police suspect list. Sharp was called in for questioning twice, and neither was a pleasant experience. Police were under enormous pressure to solve the crime and return the child. After all, this was Lucky Lindy's baby, and the entire world was watching. The department's reputation was on the line. Under the circumstances, their questioning was often brutal. Sharp, for her part, didn't help her case by lying to the police about her whereabouts on the night in question. And when the baby's remains were discovered and she was questioned again, she became agitated and very upset. The police called her in yet again for questioning, but they never got the chance. Sharp was found dead, having taken a fatal dose of cyanide. The Lindbergh butler, Oliver Whately, who was one of the 5 people present the night of the kidnapping, was also repeatedly questioned by the police. He died very suddenly of peritonitis the following year.
What's that? What's peritonitis? Whatever. Inflammation of something?
Focus on the homemade ladder used in the kidnapping began on the very night of the crime. Though crudely made, it was evident that its creator possessed carpentry and mechanical skills.
Okay, so Hauptmann, the German, he was an illegal immigrant from Germany. He was a carpenter, but he was like a professional carpenter. So, I don't know. I listened to a couple audiobooks. So, where is it? Lindbergh versus Roosevelt by James P. Duffy and A Talent to Deceive by William Norris. He had like this whole theory on who he thought did it. But, well, I don't know. Hold on.
Since the ladder was designed to expand as needed and retract into an easily carried compact piece. First checked for fingerprints, then compared with the scuffs on the windowsill outside the nursery, the wood used to construct the ladder was an important clue for authorities. A Forest Service expert named Arthur Kohler was summoned to inspect the materials. He disassembled the
A Forest Service expert.
ladder and inspected each piece of wood, every chisel mark, and every nail hole. He concluded that several distinct types of wood had been sourced to build the ladder, including one wood that was designed for use in indoor construction. Kohler traveled to wood factories and processing centers to make comparisons, as well as comparing wood sources at the homes of the Lindberghs, their family, and friends. Kohler's meticulous efforts would prove useful later on in the case. When Bruno Richard Hauptmann was arrested due to his possession of numbered bank...
Okay, so he was in possession of this money that was like the ransom money. I feel like we're skipping over a bunch of stuff. The baby was kidnapped. A month later, they give $50,000 to some guy that is referred to as Cemetery John. And it's like this guy, a friend of Lindbergh's, John Condon, is the one who hands off the money. And it's really weird because he carried on a conversation with this person for like an hour, which is not normal. So there's a lot about the case that's weird that I don't understand. So I'm not really going to claim I understand or know a lot of stuff for sure, but I really think this guy was innocent, and it's sad because he ended up getting electrocuted. He was put to death by electric chair. He had a baby of his own at the time. Like, he was in possession of the money, yes, but he didn't know where it came from. He had this fishy, his name is Isidore Fish. He was like basically a Jewish con man who died young in Germany, went back to Germany, and left this money with, he goes by Richard. His name's Bruno Richard Hauptmann, but he goes by Richard. So he left this money with Richard Hauptmann, and I guess he like owed him some money. So when he did finally like open the package after forever of not hearing from him, he was like, I'm gonna spend it. And he spent it like an innocent person. He bought gas. And it was, I believe it was like these gold reserve notes or something weird. And it was after the United States went off the gold standard. So for that reason, it was a little weird that he paid for his gas. And that's why the gas station attendant wrote down his license plate number on the note, on the money, on the gold. I forget what it's called. I'll see it in a minute, probably.
Notes from the ransom, Kohler had a new source to compare with his findings. High in Hauptmann's home attic, he discovered a plank of wood that was a perfect match to a plank.
I don't buy this shit about the plank of wood. So the ladder was created poorly. It was like in 3 sections. It was tall enough to, get up to a 2nd story window that just happened to be broken. And, they didn't live there all the time. Like, it had to have been someone knew that the baby would be there. Like, the baby normally on that day would be with relatives, but because he was sick, he was staying home. And Charles Lindbergh that night was supposed to go to some sort of party or something, but he forgot about it and didn't go, and he was home reading. And the wife was home, like everyone's home. Okay, back to the ladder. One of the rungs was supposedly made by a piece of wood from Hauptmann's attic. There's a lot of, like, A Talent to Deceive book goes way into all this and how he thinks that the trial itself, like, was totally dishonest, unfair. They were fabricating evidence and doing all sorts of dishonest stuff to frame him. And, they, like, had him write the ransom note out in his own handwriting, including all the misspellings and everything for some reason. And they had way more money. They were able to say that the handwriting looked like his. They were able to pay super expensive experts. One of Hauptmann's lawyers was drunk all the time. He did not have a very fair trial. I forget who said it. Someone I was listening to was like, it's hard to imagine. I think it was a psychologist guy. I pulled up his video. He was saying it's hard for a guy who has his own newborn baby at home to go out and murder some other guy's baby. It's just, I just don't think he was there. I don't think he did it. I don't think he made the ladder. I don't think any of it. I don't know. I could be wrong. Let's go.
Used to construct the kidnapper's ladder. That being said, not all experts agree that this was evidence.
Like, maybe that wood was planted. Sorry, that's what I was trying to say. Let's go.
Of Hauptmann's guilt, claiming that the wood in question was purposefully planted in the attic to implicate Hauptmann.
Oh, he said it.
Though they look more like a torture device than a training tool to the eyes of people today, thumb guards were commonly used in the early 20th century to discourage young children from sucking their thumbs.
That's weird.
Little Charlie was among those children who were put to bed each night with metal guards placed over.
I sucked my thumb, but this is weird.
The thumbs. The guards were attached.
My dentist bribed me to stop by, like, saying he'd buy me anything I wanted from Toys R Us. And so that's how he got me to quit. And then I got something that was called a jet copter, which was stolen shortly after because I left it out in the yard.
To a strong string or metal chains, which were secured to a crib rail, one on each side. Placed that way, a child could move about.
It's got like chains on it.
Was physically unable to bring either thumb to the mouth. Most accounts of the kidnapping make no mention of Charlie's thumb guards.
Oh.
But it was nearly 1 month after the crime, his nanny, Betty Gow, discovered a thumb guard exactly like Charlie's, crushed in the driveway leading away from the Lindbergh home.
Hold on. What do you mean crushed in the driveway? From what I heard, I don't know. I heard some things that were trying to make it sound like it should have been found before then, and they had looked everywhere, and maybe someone dropped it there afterwards, came back and dropped it there, maybe? Moving on.
Of the discovery was problematic for Lindbergh and the police, as their investigation already concluded that footprints in the grass and mud, along with pieces of the ladder, marked the kidnapper's path, a path that headed in precisely the opposite direction from the location of the thumb guard.
Well, okay.
Questions concerning the contradictory evidence were never addressed and remain one of the stranger aspects of the disappearance.
Lindbergh faked his
At the
son's
time
kid.
of his son's
Hold
kidnapping,
on. Okay, it was a plague. It was a plague.
Charles Lindbergh was one of the most famous men in the world, a premier aviator and a hero to people around the globe. In fact, it's not a stretch to say that the general public considered him above reproach. While his friends and family also respected him, they were privy to other aspects of his personality that were not so positive. Lindbergh was a notorious practical joker. Sometimes these jokes took the form of gentle teasing, but often his so-called jokes
Music.
were cruelly intended to frighten the recipient. Chief among his targets was his wife, Anne. In fact, when baby Charlie was discovered missing from his crib, the baby's nanny, Betty Gow, immediately approached Lindbergh and asked if he had taken the baby as part of a prank on
Is
his
this
wife.
another prank?
According to her handwritten statement, Gow claimed she
Hold on. I've known people that are like this, and they're not like murderers. They're just assholes.
suspected Lindbergh of yet another practical joke, since she knew he had taken the baby and hidden him before. According to authors Gregory Algren and Stephen Monnier, Gow was referring to an incident that took place only 2 months before the kidnapping. On this occasion, Lindbergh had hidden the child in a closet. He then sent his wife and the household into a panic by telling them the boy had been
Yep, he's a fraud. You're a great white hero.
kidnapped.
Oh. Eugenics may have played a role in the baby. No, I don't know. Hold on. Okay. Hold on. Okay, so the baby had like an oversized head, I guess. He was 20 months old when he was kidnapped. But Charles himself, at that age, there's photos of him looking very similar. It wasn't that freakish or anything. And this guy's going to talk about some other stuff. They're trying to say that he wanted to kill his baby because he wasn't perfect, because he's eugenics guy or something. Like, you know what? A lot of people were into eugenics back in the day. Okay, a lot of people. Eugenics is pure evil. I don't know what to say to that.
Another side of Charles Lindbergh's personality and interests that remained hidden during his lifetime had to do with his enthusiasm for eugenics. Or, for those that don't know, it is the theoretical use of biology and breeding to produce a superior human race.
Hold on. What's wrong with that? What's wrong with wanting to create superior humans? Okay, calm down.
Lindbergh considered himself in possession of such superlative genes, and he was an early supporter of Hitler's eugenics program. Later in life, Lindbergh even pursued German women with the express purpose of uniting his own genes with those of a similar background. He fathered several children this way, along with the family he had with his wife Anne.
Okay, yes, let's just get it all out. He had secret families, okay? He had like 7 illegitimate children with a bunch of German women. And Anne didn't know about it, but she might have known about it maybe, but probably didn't. I don't know. They waited till she was dead to talk about it, the offspring. Yeah. Hold on. He was like a good father to them, though. He would visit them regularly, and it's kind of a miracle he was able to keep that secret because he was so freaking famous, but maybe not so much by the time he was doing that. He traveled a lot doing consulting work, so that's probably how he was able to get away with it, but he would like have breakfast with them. Like, he was more of a father to these. It's probably, is it too dark? I don't know. He was a better father to these illegitimate kids than my own father was. Not to get too personal, but I'm just saying that because I'm apparently a huge apologetic for this person. Are you drunk? Hedy Lamarr was an anti-Semite. Semite. Oh, you said anti-smite? I read it the right way, though. Huh. Should I turn the light on? I don't want to. Okay.
So, how does eugenics connect with Lindbergh's possible involvement in his first son's disappearance? Well, when he was just 20 months old, little Charlie had trouble standing on his own, and some of his toes overlapped. Concerns about his health and a possible diagnosis of rickets meant that the little boy was given large daily doses of vitamin D and napped under a sun lamp. To his father's mind, such conditions pointed to inferior genetics. Additionally, Anne Lindbergh's sister, Elizabeth Morrow, suffered from mental illness for much of her life.
So,
Lindbergh was aware of Elizabeth's condition, and it may have served as another.
okay, how about this though, idiot? They went on to have 5 more kids with each other, in addition to his 7 illegitimate kids. By the way, with those illegitimate kids, he had kids with 2 sisters. Like, had kids with one and also had kids with her sister. Kind of weird. He just really wanted to block the market. I'm just kidding. We are still friends. That's good.
Strike against the genetics of the woman he had chosen to have a family with. Conversely, Elizabeth herself.
Okay, but they're talking about the mom's and his wife's sister's mental illness. Yeah, he went on to have 5 more kids with Anne. So
herself is considered by some to be a suspect in the
he didn't
kidnapping.
kill his kid, damn it.
Author Noel Benn, for example, cites evidence that Elizabeth was resentful of her sister's marriage and once hid the baby Charlie in a trash closet. There was apparently enough
Why is everyone hiding this baby?
concern over Elizabeth's treatment of the baby that the parents forbade her to have any contact with Charlie.
Oh, so she can't hide the baby, but you can? Okay.
In addition to being a skilled and innovative aviator in her own right, Anne Morrow Lindbergh also authored a number of memoirs associated with aviation, family life, and the lives of women in the 20th century. In the 1930s, she published 2 volumes dealing with the pioneering aviation experiences she shared with her husband. Written around the same time, but not published until decades later, was a memoir and letter collection titled Hour of Gold, Hour of Lead. Included in that volume were the author's heart-wrenching thoughts on the kidnapping and loss of her first child. In the memoir, she writes poignantly of the moment investigators discovered him and how some of his blonde curls and fluff remained. She did not record any suspicions of who had taken her son, but wrote achingly of her fear that she would forget the details.
Okay, so yeah, he's kidnapped. A month later, they give the $50,000 to Cemetery John, have a weird 1-hour-long conversation. I think that's where, I think he was waiting in the car. Charles Lindbergh lied about being deaf in 1 year. It was from the engine, from flying. He claimed to have heard, he changed his story. First, he said he heard someone say, "Hey, doc." And then when he testified at trial, he changed it to, he said, "Hey, doctor," so that he could claim, he identified the voice after not doing, the innocent guy. He testified making the innocent German guy get electrocuted.
Of his face and how it felt when she held him in her arms. Very early in the investigation, Charles Lindbergh encouraged communication between himself, the police, and the kidnappers. A series of handwritten letters and messages published in newspapers was the result, with the kidnapper demanding $50,000 in cash for the safe return of the child. The author of those letters remains disputed to this day, since the man eventually arrested, tried, and convicted of the crime was fluent in German, but the letters suggest the writer might have been a non-German posing as a German. During the first weeks of communication between the parties, Lindbergh and the police demanded a token of proof that the kidnapper indeed had the child. When the 7th letter arrived, the sleeper Charlie was wearing the night of his disappearance came with it. It appeared freshly laundered, which gave rise to more eerie suspicion, but the Lindberghs identified the sleeper as belonging to their missing son. Other items of Charlie's clothing were found on May 12, 1932, when his decomposing body was accidentally discovered in a ditch a mere 4 miles from his home.
And that's a month after
He was
the
still found
cemetery
wearing his white
handle.
undershirt, by then heavily stained. So what do you think? Who
Oh.
really kidnapped the Lindbergh baby? Let us know in the comments below.
So that was that. I don't know how long I should spend on the kidnapping. How's your cat doing? Oscar? Are you talking about Archie? He's right here, but My other cat died. She was meowing the last time I streamed in pain. So she didn't make it to the vet appointment. She passed her sleep on a nice comfy blanket. That's sad. I mean, she was really old though. Yeah, it's Archie. But yeah, so that happened. I had to deal with that in this one. But it wasn't a surprise, you know, it's a circle of life, I guess. I'm glad she didn't have to be bothered with a vet appointment, honestly. So at least she got to just go. Anyway, back to Lindbergh. Airmail pilot flight. You know, I want to share this. The beginning of this guy's video is pretty good. Where is it? I guess it connects out of that. Is this it? No. Here it is. This is an interesting take on it. It's called The Lindbergh Kidnapping, Mobs, Mass Psychology, and Myth. I just randomly find stuff.
And I was always intrigued about the Lindbergh story because it really is a story about mob psychology and collective psychology, which is kind of my area of interest. In 1932, the kidnapped baby of
Hello, Broken 76.
Charles Lindbergh became one of the biggest stories in the country. A couple of years later, a guy named Bruno Richard Hauptmann was captured and ultimately executed for crime. Now, this execution really involved mass psychology, mob rule,
vocabulary words,
and terms like numinosity, all of which we're going to get into. This kind of divided into two parts: a story about the nature of the story of Lindbergh and the kidnapping, and then followed that by a psychological interpretation of all of this stuff, which it certainly deserves. So let's begin with the concept of numinosity. Jung and Freud, you can have two kinds of dreams. If you have a Freudian dream or even a Jungian one, you forget it often in the morning. That's stuff that usually is emotional material you have not processed, which is one of the reasons you allegedly forget it. There's another class of dreams, however, that are unforgettable, that are vivid, that are remembered for your entire life. Jung talked about those.
I'm just going to randomly interject this here. My mom is kind of psychic, a little bit of a precog element. And it made me think of it because she had a dream, a vivid dream that she remembered her entire life about JFK getting killed. And it was like, basically it looked like the Zapruder film in black and white. And she said that the blood was bright red, but she was like a young girl in like high school or something. And it was like, I should ask her, was it the night before or more than that? I can't remember, but it was just a weird thing. And I told her she's psychic a little bit. She's got a little bit of psychic ability. The end.
Vivid dreams as numinous, bright, vivid, unforgettable. It's as if they sear themselves into your brains. That happens at the collective stage too. When people who were over the age of 6 heard about the Kennedy assassination, they remembered where they were, who they were with, what they were doing. They sort of imprinted their exact location in space and time for that event.
Okay.
The same thing kind of happened in 9/11.
Yeah, we know.
People remembered who they were with, how they heard it, where they were, and it was an imprinting moment. This is a numinous moment to Jung. So what happens at an individual stage for a dreamer often happens at a collective stage.
Hold on. Well, since I'm playing, his name is Jerry Cross. Just in case it's rude not to say like whose video it is.
For a people. So this story begins in 1927 with a young mid-20s guy who likes flying. and is also very intelligent, says, I think I could put together a plane that could make it a single person event. And if one person could fly across the Atlantic, they would win $25,000. And he thought he could win the $25,000.
Okay, and this video puts a lot of perspective into like Lindbergh's character, I think.
And his investors put up the money for the Spirit of St. Louis, and off he went. He didn't realize that he was entering into an envelope, into a vacuum, a vortex that would consume him. His life would never be the same after he landed in Paris. So here's Charles getting ready for his flight. And he was a handsome young man, and off he went, flying across the Atlantic. He flew over Ireland.
Hold on, that just reminded me. I just wanted to share why I called it Fair-Haired Boy. Where is it? It's like it's a thing. Fair-haired boy, a boy or a man who is liked very much and is treated well by someone, especially someone in authority. And then this one says, someone's fair-haired boy is a young man who they like better than anyone else and who therefore receives better treatment than other people. Fair-haired boy. Oh, never mind. Well, and I also called it that because there's at one point FDR said, we'll get that fair-haired boy. Okay, now back to the thing. Damn it.
Ireland, by the time he landed in Paris, this is when it started. This is when mob rule started.
I've got to go. Have a good night. Maybe I'll come back to Telegram soon. Okay. See you later. Have a good night.
100,000 people came out to see Charles Lindbergh. They picked him up and carried him around for half an hour before he could touch down. Okay. When he came back to the United States, there was a ticker day parade for him. Almost half the entire population of New York City came out to see him. He didn't own a suit, so they had to get him a suit. And he came to the White House and gave a speech. It was like a paragraph long. And everything he seemed to do just made him more and more famous. When he made his single speech at the White House, people thought, oh my God, this is like Abraham Lincoln and the Gettysburg Address. So one writer said, Charles Lindbergh became the most famous person in the world. And there's a lot of empirical evidence to suggest that that was true. He didn't expect any of this. He didn't want any of this. So people didn't talk about mass hysteria. This was in this era of the flappers in the 20s and speculation and gambling and a lack of inhibition. And Charles Lindbergh was very much the opposite of that. He was very stoic and very moralistic about his own personal behavior. So that contributed to everything. Charles Lindbergh received 100.
Broken 76 says, you ever notice really famous people have one tragic death story or something like this? Fame costs me things. Yeah, it sounds like a friggin' nightmare, honestly. It's weird because he moves to England to get away from it eventually, but I thought that maybe it changed later on, but I thought that the press, like the paparazzi in England, was just as bad. Maybe not at the time.
100,000 telegrams and 3.5 million letters. This is in 1927 now. Okay, he was a mountain was named after Charles Lindbergh, and he was given a offer of $1 million for a cigarette endorsement. He wasn't rich at all. He came from Michigan. His mother was a school teacher.
Minnesota.
He turned down the $1 million offer for a cigarette commercial because he didn't believe in smoking. Whoa! And then once again.
But yeah,
contributes to the nature of our hero.
He turned down $1 million
from the age of the.
Hold on, he turned down $1 million because he doesn't smoke, because that would be wrong. I thought so too. I thought they were breaking into his house and stuff. Yeah, he says something about trying to get his hair and like.
He was given $100,000.
Oh, someone broke into the morgue to get a picture of their dead baby. Isn't that nice?
Commercial, he turned it down. He received $5 million in offers, all of which he turned down. These are all very, very interesting stories. He dined with the President of the United States, and so did his mother. He met with the President of France, the King of Poland, Belgium. I mean, this guy walked into instant stardom. He took the spirit of St. Louis across the United States and landed in every state and made a short little speech about aviation and the future of commercial aviation. But when he came to these cities, 25% of the entire American population came out to see him. They're all looking up there. And because he's landing his Spirit of St. Louis at the airport, and they came out to hear him give his little talk about aviation, the hero. There were, when Charles Lindbergh, he was so famous that he would eat a corn cob in Iowa and throw it in the garbage. Girls would run after the corn cob and retrieve it, because this was a corn cob that was eaten by Charles Lindbergh. So this is what one author said: the great, demanding, ever-pursuing, ever-present crowd, which if it could, in its insatiable curiosity, would leave untouched not a shred of his privacy, would tear his clothes apart, pluck hairs from his head, reach into every corner of his life, would suffocate him in its fever to possess him, the idol, the famous one, who had grown to fear his fame. So it's starting to change.
Broken says that my ex-grandpa-in-law told me when he landed in Oklahoma, I guess it was a huge thing. Yeah, it's crazy. It's like he's the Beatles.
Color. Okay. So the name of my book is called Lindbergh Kidnapping, Mobs, Mass Psychology, and Myth. And it takes this extra dimension and goes with it. Okay, so when we talk about the kidnapping, in 1932, Charles Lindbergh...
I don't know if I really want to get too much into, although it is funny, hold on. Let's skip ahead a little.
20%. Everybody wanted to read about this story day in and day out. They couldn't get enough of it. 1 million Boy Scouts volunteered to search for the Lindbergh baby. Okay. Finally, 2 years later, a German named Bruno Richard Hauptmann is arrested.
So in Germany, he and another guy committed a crime. They robbed, I think, like 2 women with a baby carriage at gunpoint. So he was sort of trying to escape that crime by moving to the United States, and he promised his mom back in Germany that he would never get in trouble again. So here I go apologizing again, but I don't think he did it. I think that he meant it, and I think he kept that promise to his mom. Maybe I'm totally wrong, but yeah, he was a stowaway. It was this whole thing getting over here. He kept running into the same guy on the boat who would ship him back to where he came from, and then he got on another boat. He's like laying in a pile of coal at one point, trying to stay away from, he learned when it kept happening that he had to stop trying to befriend the guests on the ship, stop talking to them, because it made him run into the what are they called? Damn it. Like people who worked on the ship and stuff.
It's
Officers?
called the crime of the century. And they were getting ready for the trial. And the trial was the trial of the century. Again, newspapers were writing, and they were running out of things to say. But there was such an insatiable demand for copy, for stories, that sometimes they created their own stories.
He somehow met this guy, Isidore Fish, and got that money.
Clearly
Sorry,
a
I forgot what I was
lynch
going to say.
mob
Oh,
mentality.
Isidore Fish had tuberculosis, by the way. I don't know if that's what he died from, but he died young, like at 22.
When the courtroom proceedings were
After he moved back to Germany. He left the money at this guy's keeping. Even punk asses don't break promises to their mamas. I still don't have a motorcycle as living proof. Oh, wow. It's good to for your word to mean something.
Moreover, people would go into the courtroom and carve out a piece of the judge's bench as a souvenir, and pretty soon the judge had to eliminate people from the courtroom because they were just destroying the courtroom. Souvenir seekers. So here's a short.
The attempt to recover the child.
The baby.
That's Condon. John Condon, the guy who met Cemetery John in the cemetery. This guy's weird. His hero was Lindbergh, and he like just wanted to please him, and he also changed his story. He said that that was not the guy that he talked to. Yeah, you would think you would know if you talked to him for an hour. I'm confused.
Will be returned, I hope, in a short
Oh, but then later he said it was.
time. We are in contact, and nobody is giving up.
A month after the kidnapping,
He was like a big
Condon and Charles
performer.
Lindbergh delivered
He liked the
$50,000
attention,
to a
I think.
cemetery in the Bronx. The ransom is accepted, but the Lindbergh baby is not returned. 1 month later, near the Lindbergh estate, the baby's body is found. German carpenter named Bruno Richard Hauptmann. Police search his house in the Bronx. In his garage, they find hidden nearly $15,000 of the Lindbergh ransom money. And frustrating search for the kidnapper of Lindbergh's child is finally over. Though the evidence against Hauptmann is totally circumstantial, authorities feel certain they've found. Thousands flock to what newspapers call the most sensational trial of the century. Though he hates the publicity, Lindbergh attends on every.
I haven't
single
even
day.
gotten into any of the friggin' stuff with FDR, damn it. I'm so bad at planning these. Maybe I'll make it 2 hours long.
David Willens heads the prosecution. The matter used to reach the baby becomes a trial symbol and a major piece of evidence. An expert claims that it was partly constructed with wood from Hauptmann's attic.
No.
A panel of handwriting experts testify that Hauptmann's writing is identical to that in the ransom notes. The jury reaches its verdict in little more than 11 hours. As the news of Hauptmann's conviction is flashed around the world, his wife and his
It's all
attorney
because
make a
he
final
spent that
public
money
appearance.
that he got from Isidore Fish.
Mrs. Hauptmann,
F-I-S-C-H.
you still believe the innocence of your husband, don't you?
I believe, and I know
That's Hauptmann's
my husband
wife.
is innocent.
Oh, whoops.
He did not kidnap the
That.
Lindbergh baby, and he did not murder the Lindbergh baby. I wish to appeal to the people of the United States to help me.
United Press, Trenton, Hauptmann executed, 8:47 1/2.
A morbid crowd outside the prison has gathered to watch the hearse leave.
So
Gotta
there's
watch it.
the story in brief. Now, if we take a look
I think it was like a year
at the
later.
evidence against Hoffman, this is a summary, and in a pretty long chapter in my book going over this stuff. So ransom
Hold
money is
on.
found-
It says here Condon's phone number in closet. Someone on the prosecution or something, someone wrote that in there and admitted to it. Like, it's known. They were trying to frame this guy. They wanted to say it was solved. They wanted it solved. Sketch of ladder in his notebook. Whatever. Rail 16. Again, I think that was planted. I have reasons to think that. You'd have to read this book, I guess. But I don't know if I agree with this guy who wrote this book, who was suggesting, he was saying that the real killer was the illegitimate son of Anne Lindbergh. So Charles Lindbergh's wife, Anne, her father had an illegitimate son named Dwight Morrow Jr., who wanted to be like involved in the Lindbergh family and stuff, or I don't know, but he was like, or maybe it was the Morrow family. I don't know. He wasn't getting the attention he wanted, maybe, but he was kind of trying to point the finger at that guy. Whatever. Let's go
in
on.
his garage, about a third of it. Hauptmann said that he knew a friend,
Tons of theories surrounding the entire
kind of a
thing.
sleazy businessman named Isidore Fish. Isidore Fish had tuberculosis and went back to Germany, where he eventually died.
A fishy story. Gravesite of Isidore Fish, Leipzig, Germany. In Hebrew, it says, "Here lies a bachelor, young in years, a son of grace and peace towards humanity, who walked the path of the righteous. Loving son of Zalman Fish, died on the 13th of Nisan, 1934. May his soul be bound in the bundle of life. Here rests, in German, here rests our dearly beloved, unforgettable son and brother, Isidore Fish. He lived only for his people." It was his business partner, it calls him here. On December 5th, 1933, during his farewell party, Hauptmann's business partner, Isidore Fish, left Hauptmann with a shoebox of important papers, quotation marks, before sailing to Leipzig to visit relatives, but he never came back. Hauptmann claimed he had been given this box wrapped in brown paper and tied with string and had put it on a high shelf in a closet. Fish had applied for a passport on May 12, 1932, the same day the baby's body was discovered. He sailed on December 6, 1933. Hauptmann told police he had anticipated Fish's return because he had 7,000 of Hauptmann's money. Yeah, so he owed him money. Fish died of tuberculosis on March 29, 1934. He never returned to America, and Hauptmann told police he had believed his savings were lost forever until he discovered the shoebox. Hauptmann also claimed he had made the discovery of the money while cleaning the closet in which a leaky roof made the shoebox fall apart. He recovered more money, $14,600, than what he was owed by Fish. He took his findings into the garage since the bills were wet from the leaking closet. He began to dry the bills and hide them behind some wooden boards in his garage. He figured that since he was owed $7,000, it was okay for him to keep the money for his family. This sequence of events told by Hauptmann throughout the trial was dubbed by police and reporters as the fishy story. On March 1st, he said he had been with his wife. Every Tuesday, he went to Christian Fredrickson's bakery on Dyer Avenue. March 1st is the day the baby was taken. Bronx, where his wife worked. He ate dinner there and he had an alibi. Totally had an alibi. He ate dinner there and took her home at 9. Then they went to bed so they could rise early the next morning. The police also questioned where Hauptmann had been on April 2nd, the day John met Dr. Condon in the cemetery. The day was the first Saturday in the month. Every first Saturday, Hauptmann and his friends Hans Klaupenberg would meet at Hauptmann's house at 7 o'clock. They had what they called a musical night. They would sing German songs. Klaupenberg played the guitar and Hauptmann the mandolin. Klaupenberg would leave around midnight. Anna was always with them. Oh yeah, so his wife is named Anna Hauptmann's. Handwriting of Isidore Fish. Home of Isidore's Fish's wife. Confronted with the discovery of the ransom money, Hauptmann said that Isidore Fish, a German friend who had sailed for Germany the previous December, then died a few months later of tuberculosis, had left some of his belongings with him for safekeeping. When he discovered that Fish's belongings contained the gold notes, Hauptmann told investigators he decided to spend it without even telling his wife, Anna. Investigators had expected Hauptmann to confess. They were disappointed. Yeah, he never confessed, even when he was interrogated by this guy who's like supposedly known for being, really tough and able to get you to confess. He never did. Do I have another one on here? Here's another one. Oh, that's like a... What's this? This says Fish was well known in the German-American community of the Bronx as a very strange character. He had approached many of the community to invest in a variety of business schemes, most of which were bogus. He was also involved in some small fencing operations, which included the purchasing of hot money cheaply to store and reuse later. Huh. Fish and Hauptmann met in 1932, became friends, and agreed to pool the risks and profits of Fish's trade in furs and Hauptmann's stock investments. Fish had applied for a passport on May 12th, which was the same day that the Lindbergh baby was found dead, 1932. On December 9th, 1933, Fish set sail on the ocean liner Manhattan for a visit to Germany shortly after the ransom money was paid by the Lindbergh family. He paid for his ticket with $420 worth of gold certificates purportedly lent by Hauptmann. He had also purchased with the Hauptmann money $600 worth of Reichsmarks. According to Hauptmann, on December 5th, 1933, Fish left various items, including a shoebox. Identified in circulation September 18th, 1935. Others reportedly appeared in circulation after Hauptmann's execution. Yeah, I think he bought some fruit. He bought like some shoes. During this period, gold certificates were rapidly being withdrawn from circulation, and it was unusual to see one. One gold certificate used at a Bronx station was traced to Hauptmann, and he was subsequently arrested. By the way, this is going on during the Great Depression, so there's like economic despair going on. And FDR, who I'm supposed to talk about, it's almost an hour now. I guess a lot of his policies made it worse. How the hell was FDR president for so long? He got a third term. He was president for like 672 years, I swear. I heard something about Fish was sending money to relatives in Germany. Isidore Fish was. And his father, like, is the one who was talking about it, saying that I think that it was two of his siblings, their quality of life went up. There was like some sort of fur business they had going on that was doing really well. What is this? Mrs. Laura Urant, the daughter of Hauptmann's landlady, told American investigators that she had once met Fish at a party in Hauptmann's apartment, after which she regularly saw him in Hauptmann's company. Speaking of Fish, she said, Fish knew that he was plagued by an illness that would take many years to cure. Knowing that, I do not believe that if he had a great sum of money, he would have delayed getting the medical attention that he so badly needed. Okay, whatever. I don't know. So that's him. Maybe we should get more into this stuff. So this is the speech that like made him get in big trouble because he said something he wasn't supposed to about who was trying to get us into the war. Hold on, let me go back to this one for a minute. Where is it?
He was only in his 20s, and some notes were of Hauptmann's, except Hauptmann's in the just before whoever sent that machine was probably Oliver Whately, the butler.
Oh yeah, so here he talks about this weird thing where a ransom note machine is found that had been mailed to like the New Jersey police. It wasn't found until the 1950s, but it had been mailed to them while Hauptmann was in prison, and it couldn't have been him who mailed it. And it was this thing that would fit the ransom notes on it. Hold on. Let me pull up the ransom notes. Where are those? Let's X out of that one. Hold on. Sorry. Is this another? Okay. There's it. There they are. Okay. So these letters have this weird, they had holes punctured into the paper here, and like this was the weird signature that they all had. See? So anyway, this machine that he's talking about was like, I don't really understand it. A machine?
It's in charge of the
It would
dog.
have
Why did
fit.
the dog bark?
It would have fit the notes on it. Like these two prongs that would have fit through the holes. Okay, anyway.
Lindbergh heard a funny noise outside and then dismissed it. When the guy was putting up the ladder, he heard a noise, but he didn't do anything about it. So here are some of the very strange events here. After the baby's body was found, Isidore Fish suddenly, she kills herself. She's 28 years old.
I think that's
Kills herself by
suspicious.
taking cyanide. Her name was Edna. And Edna applied for a passport the day that the baby's body was found. Oh, there goes Edna.
Violet Sharp, the maid, killed
Henry
herself after
Leopold
being
killed
questioned a couple
himself. Henry
times.
Leopold was
and then the
caught
butler.
passing Lindbergh ransom.
Wait, hold on.
Before
I thought he died of something else. This is saying he killed himself, the butler.
Hauptmann was ever arrested. Hauptmann didn't know him. He was going to be they were tracking him down because they found.
Oh, this isn't the butler. Sorry, this is someone else who was spending some ransom money.
That he was passing Lindbergh ransom money, and he kills himself. Whoa! Lindbergh's butler dies. Oliver Whately was in charge of the dog. He dies an untimely death within a year. He was a young man. I think he was in his 40s. All of these things get forgotten about as soon as Hauptmann is arrested.
2 suicides and an untimely death.
Investigated. So, okay, conspiracy theorists have a heyday here on this one. Now, there are some really telling psychological reasons why Hauptmann was innocent. Okay, he said he found the ransom money 2 years afterwards, and these were gold certificates. They were going out of circulation. They were becoming increasingly rare.
I'm getting really hung up on this whole kidnap murder thing.
The money. That's how he got caught. He said Fish owed him money. Fish is dead. I found this box of all this money.
Archie, where'd you go?
He paid his rent with this money. Why? What kind of an idiot would pay his rent with traceable gold certificates, which were ransom money? Why would Hauptmann do that? He had to be retarded. To do that. He went shopping in his own neighborhood.
I was laughing when I watched this. I was not expecting him to use the R word.
Spending Lindbergh ransom money. When he bought, they were going out of circulation. They were becoming increasingly rare. He started spending the money. That's how he got caught. He said Fish owed him money. Fish is dead. I found this box of all this money, and he paid his rent with this money. Why? What kind of an idiot would pay his rent with traceable gold certificates, which were ransom money? Why would Hauptmann do that? He had to be retarded. To do that. He went shopping in his own neighborhood, spending Lindbergh ransom money. When he bought gasoline,
it's sad though. He was killed. He was put to death.
I said, "Oh my God, you got a gold certificate?" And he said, "Yeah, I've got more of those at home." Now, why would a guilty person who was on the lam say things like that and incriminate himself unless he didn't have any idea he was dealing with ransom money? When the governor of New Jersey didn't believe he was guilty, but 17 Princeton University professors said, "You have to execute him. It's your constitutional duty." So he said to Hauptmann, "Okay, you couldn't have done this crime by yourself. And all the planning that goes into it. If you name your co-conspirators, we will spare your life. You will get life in prison. You will not be executed in the electric chair." And Hauptmann said, "I didn't do it. I didn't do it. I didn't do it. I don't have any co-conspirators." Leibowitz, a famous flamboyant attorney, said, "I can get a confession out of anybody."
I have to go to the bathroom.
He was given permission to interview Hauptmann in prison.
I might run and do that. Can I leave you with him for a minute? I'm sorry.
Absolutely nowhere. Hauptmann said, "I didn't do it. I didn't do it." He was offered $90,000 to write an article to an exclusive publication that would give $90,000 to his wife and baby. and he didn't. He was even shaved for placing electrodes on his body to be electrocuted. His lawyer said, "There's no more reprieves, no more time. Don't you have anything to say about this?" He said, "I didn't do it. I didn't do it." Okay, now there are people who write to me and say they think that Hauptmann did do it. So there are, if you read the book, I don't think you can walk away with that feeling. So this story doesn't end here. You'd think it would end here, but it's not true. Hauptmann is executed in 1936, but mob rule continues. Mass psychology continues. Lindbergh has a second child, and they're driving the child to nursery school, and journalists stop the car and stick their heads in and take photographs of his second child. And he said, "We can't do this anymore. This country is crazy." He and his wife packed up their kids. They took a boat. No one knew it. And they went off to England, and they stayed in England for 3 years just to avoid the mobs. It was not going to end. They were going to still be persecuted. In England, they were not persecuted by the mobs, and they had, for the first time in their lives, some privacy. So the Lindberghs leave the country, and Lindbergh becomes interested in Joseph Kennedy, John Kennedy's father, who was an ambassador, an isolationist. And Lindbergh is asked by the United States government to go to Nazi Germany and report for the government on the status of Nazi aviation. He does. And of course, the Germans love Lindbergh, and he goes through, under the aegis of the American embassy. He goes to a dinner, and there he is given a medal, quite to his surprise, and it's a swastika-laden medal, and he accepts the medal. He's not going to throw it in their face. He was trying to be polite for the American government, but the story comes back to America that Lindbergh accepted a Nazi swastika medal. What kind of a person is he? So finally, Lindbergh comes back in 1939. People wanted him to run for president against Roosevelt. He was a Midwestern isolationist. And he didn't want the United States to get involved in World War II. And he said they're pushing.
I'm an idiot. Oh my God.
Pushing for us to get involved, and we're going to be risking American lives.
My sound was off. Thank you for
So
letting
he
me
makes a
know.
speech in Des Moines.
Sorry.
Notice the date, September 11th. September 11th is very important.
Yeah, he gives this speech on September 11th. He says death of the hero. He's just being all weird psychologist about it. Damn it. What was I saying? Oh, God. I was talking about how there's a show that's trying to talk about this alternate history if he had run for president. I'm such a jackass.
Important date in American collective
Okay,
psychology.
this is the speech that got him in
the
trouble.
day that the Pentagon they broke ground to build the Pentagon. But
He named
also,
them.
Lindbergh's heroism comes to an end on September 11th, 1941. He comes and he's part of the American First campaign. Like America First.
The America
We
First
don't want
Committee.
to go to war with Germany. He makes this terrible speech, and it gets terrible.
It's really not that terrible of a speech.
Publicity from it. Here is a bit of that speech.
In selecting these three groups as the major agitators for war, I have included only those whose support is essential to the war party. If any of these groups, the British, the Jewish, or the administration, stops agitating for war, I believe there will be little danger of our involvement.
By the way, they're not like jeering and booing him. They're jeering and booing who he's talking about, the war agitators.
So, Lindy makes a boo-boo. He says the Jewish, and as soon as he says the Jewish, there's tremendous outcry in the press against Lindbergh. And
Okay, yeah, not allowed to say that. I've got some more of it. Where is it? This starts his speech like right after I think that part that we just heard.
We cannot allow the natural passions and prejudices of other peoples to lead our country to destruction.
Oh, yeah, so here's his high-pitched voice.
The Roosevelt administration is the third powerful group which has been carrying this country toward war.
So he said the British, the Jewish, and the Roosevelt administration. But they got really upset that he said Jewish.
Its members have used
The crowd is very raucous.
Its members have used the war emergency
What is this?
Its members have used the war emergency to obtain a third presidential term for the first time in American history.
Hold on. Okay, so wait, what? How did he get a third presidential term for the first time in American history? What did he use? I have to rewind it.
Used the war to add unlimited billions. They have used the war to add unlimited billions to term for its members have used the war emergency to obtain a third presidential term for the first time in American history.
How is that even possible? He got a third term?
To add unlimited billions to a debt which was already the highest we have ever known. And they have used the war.
Okay, did I already mention this? 86% of America agreed with Charles Lindbergh about not wanting to get involved in the war. And there were British agents who infiltrated the Gallup polling organization. And they were able to like somehow manipulate that over the course of 5 months to make it seem. Where are my notes? Hold on. These are my notes. What the heck? What the? Sorry, I guess it's not better.
Justify the restriction of congressional power and the assumption of dictatorial procedures on the part of the president and his appointees. The power of the Roosevelt administration.
Hold on. Sorry. Okay. Archie, this is awkward. Can you go on your spot here? Can you go there? Sorry. Okay, 86% of Americans don't want to go to war against Germany and Italy. From June to November 1940, the Gallup polls appear to show a substantial change in American public opinion toward the war. June 25th, over 64% say it's more important to stay out of the war than to assist Britain. October 20th, the poll is split 50-50, so from June to October. And then November 19th, 60% say it's more important to help Britain than to stay out of the war. So, yeah, British agents working inside the Gallup organization. Yeah, that's fishy. Broken 76 says, that's why they let Pearl Harbor happen. Right, so Pearl Harbor was not a surprise. They knew it was going to happen, and they let it happen. Just like another event in 2001. Yeah. And if I remember this correctly, Hitler did not want Japan to do that. So Pearl Harbor happens. America declares war on Japan. Like, Hitler was hoping that Japan would attack Soviet Union so that they could force them into a two-front war. Instead, dumbass Japan attacks America. Sorry. Whatever. And then, so America declares war on Japan. They did not declare war on Hitler or on Germany or on Italy yet. And then this is a mistake, I guess. A lot of people say, stupid mistake. Hitler declares war on the United States, thinking that that would trigger Japan to declare war on the Soviet Union, which it did not. They didn't do that. And anyway, so then the United States declares war on Germany and Italy. Okay, I think I got that sorted out. And FDR and his little rivalry with Lindbergh, it started with this airmail scandal where FDR came into power and he canceled the contracts for the airmail. Should I pull that up? Hold on. Sorry, I'm all over the place. I know I have that. So, also known as the airmail fiasco, political scandal resulting from a 1934 congressional investigation of the awarding of contracts to certain airlines to carry airmail and to the use of the U.S. Army Air Corps to fly in the mail. In 1930, during the administration of President Herbert Hoover, Congress passed the Airmail Act of 1930. Do you have a Telegram channel? I do. You know, I should have put that. Hold on. Let me put that somewhere. I should have put it in the thing. Should have, but I didn't. But I will right now. There we go. I don't know if you can see that yet, but there you go. Yes, we do. I do. I guess I should say I. Okay, so airmail scandal, right? This is how they first started butting heads. He objected to FDR canceling the airmail shit and then trying to do it with like the government doing it. Against former Hoover administration official for the scandal. 2 days after, what? Contempt of Congress against William P. McCracken. I don't know. It's not that exciting. Roosevelt canceled all existing airmail contracts with the airlines and ordered the Air Corps to deliver the mail until new contracts could be let. The Air Corps was ill-prepared to conduct a mail operation, particularly at night, and from its outset on February 19th, encountered severe winter weather. The Army Air Corps mail operation suffered numerous crashes and the deaths of 13 airmen, causing severe public criticism of the Roosevelt administration. Temporary contracts were put into effect on May 8th by the new Postmaster General, James A. Farley, in a manner nearly identical to that of the spoils conference that started the scandal. Service was completely restored to the airlines by June 1st, 1934. June 12th, Congress passed the new Airmail Act, canceling the provisions of the 1930 law and enacting punitive measures against executives who were a part of the spoils conference. I don't really understand, but yeah, that's how he first pissed off FDR, was talking about that. I have like, he wrote letters and would release them to the press, and I think FDR accused him of being rude for releasing a letter to the press before he had the chance to receive it and read it or something. And I don't know, whatever, they just started publicly talking shit, I guess. Okay, should I go back to the speech? I'm sorry. Sure, let's do that. But then later, their differences were about, you know, the war agitation of FDR and Lindbergh not wanting that.
Depends upon the maintenance of a wartime emergency. The prestige of the Roosevelt administration depends upon the success of Great Britain, to whom the president attached his political future at a time when most people thought that England and France could easily win the war. The danger of the Roosevelt
crowd is kind of annoying.
Lies in its subterfuge. While its members have promised us peace, they have led us to war, heedless of the platform upon which they were elected.
So Lindbergh was not a pacifist, by the way. He was like just not into intervention. So when they did, when Pearl Harbor happened, so at one point he resigned from the U.S. Army Air Corps, and the FDR administration was all like, how should we respond to his resignation? Ignore that part. He resigned because FDR had, at a press conference, he compared him to Copperheads, which was like something from Civil War, like accusing him of something for being an isolationist, for not wanting to enter the war. And that's why he resigned. He because he was being called unpatriotic. He was being insulted, so he resigned. But after Pearl Harbor, he tried to sign back up immediately, and they wouldn't let him. And that's when the administration discussed, how should we deal with him applying again? And they were like, should we just leave it in limbo and never respond? Should we, I don't know, the stupid details. Like FDR was kind of vindictive. He was just kind of a vindictive person. And, okay, I'll just continue now.
In selecting these three groups as the major agitators for war, I have included only those whose support is essential to the war party. If any of these groups, the British, the Jewish, or the administration,
oh, there's that part,
stops agitating for war, I believe there will be little danger of our involvement. I do not believe that any two of them are powerful enough to carry this country to war without the support of the third. And to these three, as I have said, all other groups are of secondary importance. When hostilities commenced in Europe in 1939, it was realized by these groups that the American people had no intention of entering the war. They knew it would be worse than useless to ask us for a declaration of war at that time. But they believed that this country could be placed into the war.
He felt like World War I, our involvement in that was a mistake and didn't want to do that again. Maybe next week I should do, or maybe it'll be in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Sorry. But the Lusitania, the sinking. I don't know a lot about World War I, and I really need to, because it's like the prequel.
War in very much the same way that it was enticed into the last one.
Enticed into the last one.
They planned first to prepare the United
That reminds me, apparently Zelensky is talking shit. The guy that we're giving Ukraine, his country, billions of dollars. I don't remember being asked if I approved of that, if I was okay with that. If, I did not consent to that. But anyway, he said we're like ridiculous. Shit, what was that quote? Let's find it. It was unrelated, but kind of related. Zelensky said, Americans are ridiculous, decadent, overfed, and I have contempt for them. It's like, you're welcome. Moving on.
States for foreign war under the guise of American defense. Second, to involve us in the war step by step without our realization. Third, to create a series of incidents which would force us into the actual conflict. These plans were, of course, this was September 11th, 1941, and then obviously Pearl Harbor happened December 7th, 1941. A few months later. Covered and assisted by the full power of their propaganda, our theaters soon became filled with plays portraying the glory of war. Newsreels lost all semblance of objectivity. Newspapers and magazines began to lose advertising if they carried anti-war articles. A smear campaign was instituted against individuals who opposed intervention. The terms fifth columnist, traitor, Nazi, anti-Semitic.
What's a Nazi? He said it funny.
Were thrown ceaselessly at anyone who dared to suggest that it was not to the best interests of the United States to enter war.
Doesn't even know how to say it.
Men lost their jobs if they were frankly anti-war. Many others dared no longer speak. Before long, lecture halls that were open to advocates of war were closed to speakers who opposed it. A fear campaign was inaugurated. We were told that aviation, which has held the British fleet...
Oh, you know how I mentioned the British agents who infiltrated stuff? This guy, William Stevenson, who oversaw the secret agency, FDR said to him, I'm your biggest undercover agent.
Off the continent of Europe, made America more vulnerable than ever before to invasion. Propaganda was in full swing.
Here's another quote from FDR. I'll clip that young man's wings. He had like a weird, I don't know, the way he talked about him. We'll get that fair-haired boy. Yeah, okay.
There was no difficulty in obtaining billions of dollars.
Hamilton Fish attacked by British secret agents. this was like a politician who was an isolationist, and yeah, he was another example of someone they went after.
For arms under the guise of defending America.
Republican.
Our people stood united on a program for defense. Congress passed appropriation after appropriation for guns and planes and battleships, with the approval of the
And
overwhelming
this is Hamilton Fish, no relation to Isidore Fish.
majority of our citizens.
FISH.
That a large portion of these appropriations was to be used to build arms for Europe, we did not learn until later. That was another step. To use a specific example, in 1939, we were told that we should increase our Air Corps to a total of 5,000 planes. Congress passed the necessary legislation. A few months later, the administration told us that the United States should have at least 50,000 planes for our national safety. But almost as soon, almost as fast
Rabble-rousing,
as
rabble-rousing.
were turned out from our factories, they were sent abroad, although our own Air Corps was in the utmost need of new equipment. So that today, 2 years after the start of war, the American Army has only a few hundred thoroughly modern bombers and fighters. Less, in fact, than Germany is able to produce in a single month. Ever since its inception, our arms program has been laid out for the purpose of carrying on the war in Europe, far more than for the purpose of building an adequate defense for America. Only one thing holds this country from war today. That is the rising opposition of the American people. Our system of democracy and representative government is on test today as it has never been before. We are on the verge of a war.
I had no idea he talked about stuff like this. Very interesting. Thanks. Yeah, Broken. He was an interesting guy.
In which
In my
the only
opinion.
victor
He kind of reminds me of, like, I never met him, but I had an uncle who was like kind of a daredevil, but like my dad too, actually, but like shy and quiet, but they were motorcycle racers, basically.
would be chaos and prostration. We are on the verge of war, for which we are still unprepared, and for which no one has offered a feasible plan of victory. A war which cannot be won without sending our soldiers across an ocean to fight and to force a landing on a hostile coast against armies stronger than our own. We
Boo! Okay, come on.
not yet too late to stay out. It is not yet too late to show that no amount of money or propaganda or patronage can force a free and independent people into war against its will.
Sorry, there's like fur in my nose. Okay, so that was that. What else have we got? Let me look at my notes again. A Talent to Deceive, The Search for the Real Killer of the Lindbergh Baby by William Norris. Thumb guards to keep him from sucking. Okay, no, Heidi, we already talked about the kidnapping. I'm always all over the place. Lindbergh testified against the Airmail Act of 1934. When they moved away, the Lindberghs, a bunch of people accused them of being like anti-American or like, I don't know, quitters or whatever. Or something. I don't know. People are just talking shit, I guess, all the time. after he stopped being like the golden boy, I guess. But they were doing it for their own safety, and they did come back. They never renounced their citizenship or anything. So he met FDR once and only once. April 20th. Nice job, Heidi. You didn't put the year. I don't think they got the chance to like really sit down and talk or anything like that. JP Morgan and others are pushing for war. British campaign to drag the US into the war. Polling thing. I don't know why I put Wendell Willkie. Interventionist supporter of FDR. Okay. He started the draft. Oh, yeah. So unemployment rates start to go down after he reinstates the draft. So the only thing that saved the economic despair was the war. Maybe that's got something to do with why he wanted. I don't know. Pearl Harbor attack, 2,402 dead, 1,282 wounded. Lindbergh volunteers to serve in the Army Air Corps again. And that's when FDR said, I'll clip that young man's wings. Okay, so here's an article. FDR versus Lindbergh, Setting the Record Straight by John J. Dwyer. It's on The New American. Oh, I guess I could share it. So U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt and American aviator Charles Lindbergh were the two greatest American icons of the first half of the 20th century. One led America throughout the Great Depression and World War II. For better or worse, that is correct. The other gained fame when he risked his life to be the first person to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean, crossing between New York and Paris. According to major media and many history books, President Roosevelt became more and more a statesman in office after being elected and was largely responsible for America recovering from the Great Depression and for the Allies winning World War II. Yeah, I don't think so. Whatever. Consequently, spreading democracy, why does it have a quotation marks, throughout the world. Yet Lindbergh's life after gaining public prominence was a study in wreck and ruin, with his son being kidnapped and murdered, and Lindbergh becoming a speaker for an isolationist movement. But the actual histories of the men suggest that history is often little more than propaganda that has been oft repeated. An accounting of the quality of the men's judgments, their standards of behavior in interpersonal conflicts, and their personal accomplishments makes it logical that American history should instead laud Lindbergh while recoiling from Roosevelt. Oh, okay, someone's opinionated here. Modern Americans can scarcely imagine the emotion and awe with which peoples across the world regarded Lindbergh, who was widely christened the Lone Eagle, following his pioneer 1927 flight, blah, 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 we know. When his infant son was kidnapped, the heart of the country. Okay, Roosevelt's rise to the national and international stage was not as sudden. He capitalized on the fact that his distant cousin, Theodore Roosevelt, was one of the most admired U.S. presidents and managed to become governor of New York. After winning 2 gubernatorial terms, FDR parlayed his own handsome visage, galvanizing charisma, and message of hope for Great Depression-ravaged America into the presidency in 1933, and soon came into conflict with Lindbergh. Lindbergh had never pursued political causes and had retreated with Anne from public view and the vulture-like pursuit of the media following the staggering loss of their son. But then Roosevelt, riding a historic wave of success and popularity, issued an executive order in early 1934 that outlawed an entire industry, private airline mail carrying. Instead, Roosevelt determined the U.S. military would provide the air transportation for delivering air mail. Democrat Roosevelt charged that Republican companies were price and route fixing. The Washington, D.C. Court of Appeals later ruled his actions arbitrary and without due process of law. The Lone Eagle burst back into the limelight with a brief letter to the president protesting his actions. Lindbergh declared them unwarranted and contrary to American principles and their wielding of federal government power over the private sector, whose production funded that government. Round 1 was underway between between two of the most legendary Americans in history, and the airmail controversy morphed overnight into an epic Roosevelt versus Lindbergh showdown. Brave Army pilots, ill-trained for their new mail-carrying mission and flying planes far inferior to the airlines. One commercial liner, for instance, could carry the load of 6 Army planes. Okay, so the government sucked at it, and inadequate for either the pitch black of night or the freezing snow-blown winter began immediately to perish. As the body count rose to 12 and accidents to 66, masses of airmail were delayed or never delivered, and public fury mounted at the administration. Roosevelt ignored the advice of friends and enemies, business people, military leaders, and government officials alike to reinstate private mail delivery, and instead orchestrated a feverish behind-the-scenes campaign to redirect blame for the burgeoning disaster, including against Lindbergh, whose statements legitimized the therefore unheard-of phenomenon of wide public criticism of Roosevelt. FDR attempted to portray Lindbergh as a tool of the airlines. Don't worry about Lindbergh, he scowled to an aide. We will get that fair-haired boy. Yeah. However, the president soon had to admit defeat and asked Congress to pass legislation returning airmail service to private carriers, reversing his action of barely 90 days before. Roosevelt, okay, so he looked like an ass in that. Roosevelt ally Henry Tapp Arnold, later 5-star commanding general of U.S. Army Air Forces during World War II, summarized the fiasco. Within 2 weeks, we were forced to realize that although the will to do might get the job done, the price of our doing it was equal to the sacrifice of a wartime combat operation. Courage alone could not substitute for years of cross-country experience, for properly equipped airplanes, and for suitable blind flying instruments, such as the regular airline mail pilots were using. New Deal failure. Roosevelt's tenure in office reinforced the perception that his need to be considered right trumped his desires to actually get things right. His famed first 100 days, contrary to many of his campaign promises about avoiding the centralization of government power, unleashed an unparalleled blizzard of legislation in which the federal government sought to correct the supposed failures of the capitalistic system through the Civilian Conservation Corps, the Agricultural Adjustment Act, the National Industrial Recovery Act, and many other new laws. It is common sense to take a method and try it, he explained. If it fails, admit it frankly and try another. But above all, try something. The nation had just suffered through 3 years of Herbert Hoover's ineffectual post-stock market crash, economic schemes, and the unemployment rate stood at over 23% at Roosevelt's inauguration. So the majority of citizens were willing to give him a chance. Though the realization gradually dawned on Roosevelt and his minions that no amount of constitutionally questionable New Deal programs and Machiavellian presidential scheming could end the Depression, Roosevelt kept his programs going full steam ahead. Near the end of Roosevelt's second term, Secretary of Treasury Henry Morgenthau, a key New Deal architect, penned this startling confession regarding the administration's failure. We have tried spending money. We are spending more than we have ever spent before, and it does not work. And I have just one interest. And now, if I am wrong, somebody else can have my job. I want to see this country prosper. I want to see people get a job. I want to see people get enough to eat. We have never made good on our promises. I say after 8 years of this administration, we have just as much unemployment as when we started, and enormous debt to boot. As nations on nearly every continent emerged from the economic cataclysm, U.S. unemployment skyrocketed back up to 9 million workers in 1939, 12 million if counting Americans employed at taxpayer-funded make-work jobs, a total nearly that of when Roosevelt first won the presidency and after oceans of New Deal spending. As the 1930s wound down, Roosevelt's resolve not to take his hand off the tiller steering America's economic course was creating the unemployment that would help impel him to push America into another world war. What the heck's going on up there? And another face-off with Lindbergh. In September 1939, when Germany and Russia invaded Poland, precipitating World War II, Roosevelt saw his chance to eliminate U.S. unemployment. End of sentence. Unemployment. Amity Glass, I don't know how to say that, opined in her Depression Chronicle, The Forgotten Man, a war would hand to Roosevelt the thing he had always lacked, a chance, quite literally, to provide jobs to the remaining unemployed. On the junket down the Potomac, for example, he could count 6,000 men at work at Langley Field, 12,000 at Portsmouth, Navy Yard, where there had been 7,600 and new employment in the military, or the prospect of it for Americans elsewhere. Roosevelt hadn't known what to do with the extra people in 1938, but now, 1940, he did. He could make them soldiers. Never mind that the private sector unemployment problem was exacerbated by the economic drag caused by his costly big government programs, or that going to war would make government even more expensive. Roosevelt's only problem was convincing Americans of the necessity to fight. No easy chore. The American public was disgusted with Europe after it had torn itself to shreds for no legitimate reason in the Great War, dragging the United States into the fray to win the fight, then reneged on billions of dollars in war repayments while pillorying the United States as a villainous creditor called Uncle Shylock, not to mention America's 460,000 deaths resulting from that war. The American public had no interest in saving England's rapacious empire again, or in dealing with European geopolitics. Roosevelt, again, contrary to promises to the electorate, schemed, am I saying that wrong? And crafted plans to involve the United States in Europe's latest war, while Lindbergh worked assiduously to keep America out of the war. This is long. Dragged into war. Okay, so it talks about stuff. Neutrality. Roosevelt also disregarded the Congressional Neutrality Acts passed by Congress and supported by the public, which applied U.S. embargoes of all war material to all warring nations and forbid loans or credit to warring parties, creating conditions so that allies such as the British did not have to pay cash for American war material. And he championed the Lend-lease Act through Congress. I think I pulled that up. What's that? Oh, crap. This is what I was talking about while I had myself muted. It's the people who made The Wire. It's like this TV show where they're like, the nightmare of what if Charles Lindbergh had run for president? Wouldn't that be a nightmare? Scary. Anyway, that's all I was talking about. I'll X out of that. Oh, this is the book I read. Oh, that's about the kidnapping. We're past that. How long is this? 147? Shit. Oh! I don't really know where to end this. Applied U.S. embargoes of all war materials to warring nations and forbid loans or credit to warring parties, creating conditions so that allies such as the British did not have to pay. Oh, I already read that. As he launched high-level military meetings between the United States and Britain, taking extreme measures to hide them from the American people. In conjunction with the meetings, he conspired with a vast British espionage, propaganda, extortion, and character assassination operation based in New York City to influence the nation toward war. He attempted to convince the U.S. public that Hitler intended a new world order encompassing the Western Hemisphere, Central and South America. FDR falsely declared, Central and South America, FDR falsely declared, would be recognized into 5 vassal states under Nazi rule. U.S.-based British spies forged a secret map of the fictional German plans for Roosevelt. Roosevelt loosed ships such as the USS Greer on German U-boats in aid of the British. Other American vessels such as the USS Niblack themselves attacked U-boats in waters thousands of miles from the United States. Yeah, they were fighting in the ocean informally. And while Hitler went to extremes to prevent German attacks on Americans, even forbidding attacks on U.S. ships in self-defense, Roosevelt publicly denounced the Germans for attacking U.S. naval vessels. Roosevelt Lieutenant Robert Sherwood wrote following the war, if the isolationists had known the full extent of the secret alliance between the United States and Britain, their demands for impeachment would have rumbled like thunder throughout the land. Nonetheless, Roosevelt failed to provoke Hitler into committing overt acts of war against American vessels, as the German dictator was determined to avoid a great war like two-front European land war. He was determined to avoid a great war like two-front European land war. So Roosevelt turned his efforts to the Pacific and the Japanese to bait them into attacking the United States. Of course, provoking a Japanese attack also provided a backdoor strategy to U.S. entry into the war in Europe because of Japan's alliance with Hitler. The Herculean research of World War II Navy veteran Robert B. Stinnett and others provides a sanguinary roadmap of Roosevelt's efforts in that respect. The president implemented all 8 planks of the infamous McCollum Memorandum, authored by Lieutenant Commander Arthur H. McCollum, head of the Far East Deck of the Office of Naval Intelligence. These planks advocated actions about which McCollum stated, if by these means Japan could be led to commit an overt act of war against the United States, so much the better. So much the better. They included a new and dramatic U.S. military presence in the Far East, the gradual choking off of all crucial manufacturing elements to Japan by America and its allies, and placement of the U.S. Pacific Fleet in Hawaii, an isolated outpost thousands of miles toward Japan from the American mainland. Admiral James O. Richardson, commander of the U.S. Pacific Fleet, immediately recognized the jeopardy in which this move placed the fleet and protested so strongly to Roosevelt that the president fired him. After meeting with the president on October 16, 1941, Republican Secretary of War Henry Stimson, a staunch internationalist and member of the World Government Promoting Council on Foreign Relations, wrote in his diary, "We face the delicate question of the diplomatic fencing to be done so as to be sure Japan is put into the wrong and makes the first bad move, overt move." A diary entry 6 weeks later, following a meeting of the War Cabinet, less than 2 weeks before the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, clarifies what Stimson meant by overt move. The question was how we should maneuver them, the Japanese, into firing the first shot without allowing too much danger to ourselves. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, Stimson confessed that my first feeling was of relief that a crisis had come in a way which would unite all our people. After the war, he added, we needed the Japanese to commit the first overt act. And Lindbergh was like, when Pearl Harbor happened, he was like, how did that? He was accusing, like, why weren't they protected? How was that allowed to happen? Because they let it happen. Meanwhile, Lindbergh presciently discerned the gathering dangers to the nation and began a series of radio broadcasts and public speeches in September 1939 against America's involvement in yet another European war. In one speech, he issued a plea for American independence, asking, why in the second century of our national existence must we be confronted with the quarrels of the old world that our forefathers left behind when they settled in this country? Though he personally disdained public involvement in controversial political issues, he eventually joined America First, the 800,000-strong non-interventionist but not pacifist organization, and he crafted a platform comprised on 4 main elements: an embargo on offensive weapons and munitions to warring nations, the unrestricted sale of purely defensive armaments to anyone who wanted them to protect themselves from attack, the prohibition of American shipping from the belligerent countries of Europe and their danger zones, and the refusal of credit to belligerent nations or their agents. Okay, before I forget, he did, even though he couldn't get FDR to let him rejoin the Air Corps, he somehow still did fly like 50 missions and got in a dogfight and like downed a fighter jet. Like, he did fight in the war, but I think he was doing it somehow as a civilian. So he like joined the war effort because he like had this, sense of obligation to the country, I guess. But I'll find the details, hopefully. It's almost 2 hours. Shit. Lindbergh's tenets were intended to ward off another experience like World War I, wherein U.S. banks loaned the Allies the funds to buy American munitions, and hence pushed strongly for American involvement in the war and for Allied victory in order to ensure repayment of their loans. Still half a year before the U.S. entrance into the war, in one of his most famous speeches before 25 to 30,000 people in and around New York City's Madison Square Garden, Lindbergh thundered forth the suspicions of millions of Americans. We have been led toward war against the opposition of 4/5 of our people. To deafening applause, he continued, "From every section of this country, a cry is rising against this war. But it is a cry that reaches beyond the question of war alone. It echoes from the very foundations on which our system of government is built. It asks how this situation came about. It demands an accounting from a government that has led us to war while it promises peace." It says Roosevelt loosed all but the hounds of hell on him. And the media that Lindbergh biographer Scott Berg stated had grown to resent Lindbergh's uncooperative attitude and instantly revised history. FDR's political allies excoriated the aviator with an armada of untrue accusations. They called him an isolationist, though he advocated vigorous American commercial trading around the world and urged the United States not to build a wall around our country and isolate ourselves from contact with the rest of the world. Okay, so he was not an isolationist. He was just a non-interventionist, not a pacifist. In essence, Lindbergh, like others in the America First Committee, agreed with George Washington's opposition to permanent alliances, especially with Europe and its frequent controversies, while trading with all nations. Roosevelt's allies also called Lindbergh a defeatist, an appeaser of Germany, though at the same time Lindbergh managed to gain unprecedented access to the German Luftwaffe, probably saying it wrong, German Air Force, and became the first non-German to fly the legendary Messerschmitt 109 fighter plane, and he provided intelligence to the U.S. military about Nazi capabilities. Hap Arnold declared, "Lindbergh gave me the most accurate picture of the Luftwaffe, its equipment, leaders, apparent plans, training methods, and present defects that I had so far received." And Arnold invited him to serve on an elite U.S. military aircraft development board. Lindbergh was called a Nazi fellow traveler, and Roosevelt and others privately said he was a Nazi. Yet Lindbergh spoke and wrote in many venues of his disgust with Nazi excesses and wrongdoing. Okay, I will say I did see a picture of him doing like the Roman salute. Unless, maybe I should find it. I don't know. It was him and two other people. But it probably wasn't as big a deal. I don't know when it was. Whatever. There was a picture of him doing that. You can find it. I don't really care about that, honestly, but Roosevelt's forces went after Lindbergh, other non-interventionists, and even critical letter writers to the White House in additional ways, as Duffy chronicled. I think he spied on him too. I think he like wiretapped him or whatever it's called. They didn't find anything on him, I don't think. Hold on. Okay, so Roosevelt and others privately said he was a Nazi, yet Lindbergh spoke and wrote in many venues about. Yeah. He was called an anti-Semite primarily due, as historian Duffy wrote, to a single claim he made in one Des Moines speech that Jews were among the influential groups, including the British and the Roosevelt administration, that shaped America's war policies. Lindbergh never blamed American Jews for their attitude toward the war. To the contrary, even as he criticized Jewish support for the war, he expressed sympathy and understanding for the Jewish position. Interestingly, whereas Lindbergh's friends, including Jews and family, insisted, in the words of Harry Guggenheim, that he has never had the slightest anti-Semitic feeling, numerous accounts exist of Roosevelt having such, including by key Jewish aides, such as Morgenthau and Henry Hicks. Yeah, FDR's got some funny quotes. Roosevelt's force. Okay, so I already read that. Oh yeah, trying to find dirt on people. The president himself initiated a cooperative venture with J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI, in which the White House supplied the Bureau the names and addresses of the letter senders so that the FBI could provide information on them. The enduring vindictiveness of Roosevelt evidenced itself in his determination to keep Lindbergh from any military role in the U.S. war effort, despite the aviator's wholehearted support of the war after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, and his stature as one of the world's foremost aviation experts. Wiser heads eventually prevailed. Oh, okay. And Lindbergh's wartime resume was extraordinary? Okay. He corrected problems in the Army's B-24 Liberator bomber flew high-altitude test flights in the P-47 Thunderbolt fighter, and conducted dangerous research on combating airborne oxygen blackouts using himself as a guinea pig. He cared about his country. So he did something that made it so that instead of only being able to fly for 6 hours, they were able to extend that to like 10 hours or something. Maybe, I think it was 6 to 10. Yeah, it was called, I forget what it was called, something leaning, something to do with the engine so that it was able to fly for longer, maybe carry more fuel. I forget exactly. Maybe it'll say it. At 42 years old, virtually invalid age for a fighter pilot, he flew 50 combat missions in the Pacific. Colonel Charles McDonald, commander of the famed Satan's Angels fighter group, said Lindbergh was indefatigable. He flew more missions than was normally expected of a regular combat pilot. He dive-bombed enemy positions, sank barges, and patrolled our landing forces on Nomfor Island. He was shot at by almost every anti-aircraft gun the NIPs, oh my god, Japanese, had in Western New Guinea. He also increased the bomb load of the Navy's F-4U Corsair fighter plane to 4,000 pounds, the heaviest ever carried by the fighter, then personally dropped it on Wochi Island, demolishing a Japanese anti-aircraft gun battery. After he devised how to extend the P-38 Lightning fighter's flight distance by hundreds of miles, Supreme Commander of the Allied powers in the Pacific, Douglas MacArthur, engaged him as a consultant and offered him whatever plane he wished to fly. Lindbergh's discovery of how to improve the P-38's flying distance enabled the fighter plane to escort bombers to the Japanese-held island of Palau, aiding in the capture of the island and leading to its use as a launching pad for MacArthur's triumphant return to the Philippines. In a head-to-head aerial dogfight with the Japanese group commander, Lindbergh missed crashing head-on with the enemy's plane by 5 feet and shot it down. Aiding a fellow pilot in another dogfight, he got jumped by a Mitsubishi Zero that fired from directly behind him as he commended his soul to God. But another American fighter shot down the Zero in the nick of time. Having personally confronted the true horrors of war in the Pacific, though, Lindbergh bitterly denounced it in his private journal as the awful truth of the German crimes against the Jewish people came out. Here we were doing the same thing to the Japs. He wrote about the attitudes he encountered. They really are lower than beasts. Every one of them ought to be exterminated. How many times I heard American officers in the Pacific say those very words. And why beholdest thou the mote that is in thy brother's eye, but considerest not the beam that is in thine own eye? I think he's quoting the Bible there, New Testament. Having personally confronted, what the hell? He chronicled the shooting of Japanese soldiers attempting to surrender so that other Japanese soldiers would remain in the jungle and slowly starve. Marines firing on unarmed Japanese swimming ashore at Midway, troops machine gunning prisoners on a Hollandia airstrip. Archie, no. Australians shoving captured Japanese out of transport planes over the New Guinea mountains. Japanese shin bones carved off for letter openers and pen trays. Japanese heads buried in anthills to get them clean for souvenirs, and infantry's favorite occupation of poking, stop it, through the mouths of Japanese corpses for gold-filled teeth. He added, what is barbaric on one side of the earth is still barbaric on the other. Okay, sorry, totally unrelated, but that just made me remember that the baby died from blunt force trauma to the head. His baby when it was killed. It was probably killed shortly after it was kidnapped, like probably the same night. Sorry. Anyway, back to this. Judge not that ye... Archie keeps trying to jump up here. Judge not that ye be not judged, he continued. It is not the Germans alone or the Japs, but the men of all nations to whom this war has brought shame and degradation. He also wrote of the legacy of using violence to solve mankind's ills. Lynchings, witch burnings at the stake for the benefit of Christ and God. In the 1950s, the U.S. Senate approved President Eisenhower's nomination of Lindbergh as a brigadier general in the U.S. Army Reserve. Okay, I guess I should stop soon. It's been 2 hours and 5 minutes. Interestingly, the two great adversaries met in person one time on April 20th, 1939, early in their conflict over the coming war. And even then, Lindbergh saw through Roosevelt's facade of charm. Roosevelt invited Lindbergh to his office following circulation of the latter's momentous reports on German aviation. FDR kept Lindbergh waiting 45 minutes, then met with him for 15. Lindbergh wrote of the cordial visit in his journal. I liked him and feel that I could get along with him well, but there was something about him I did not trust, something a little too suave, too pleasant, too easy. It is better to work together as long as we can, yet somehow I have a feeling that it may not be for long. Despite no animus on the part of Lindbergh toward Roosevelt and Lindbergh's correct discernment of the state of international politics, Roosevelt's campaign to vilify him was largely a success, though Lindbergh was a celebrity in his own right. Thus, Franklin Roosevelt graduated onto the front of textbooks, currency, and best presidents lists. Charles Lindbergh, meanwhile, won the laurels of hatred and slander reserved for the truest patriot. He who loves his country enough to criticize her for her own good, a lesson that patriots of today know only too well, is repeated almost daily in America through the cooperation of like-minded media and politicians. Huh. Okay. I think that's going to be just about it. Talked about it. 2 hours. Obviously, there's a lot more to it. It's the guy's entire life we're talking about here. All the kidnapper letters start with "Dear Sir." Maybe we can look at those for 2 seconds. It's like, "Dear Sir, we have you no smoke and use public." Never mind, I can't read this. What the hell am I? Let's stop. I'm going to stop now. Thank you. The end. That was Charles Lindbergh. There was a movie made about him at some point, I guess, called The Spirit of St. Louis. I had no idea he was a general or a lot of this. It is very interesting how they downplay him in historical mainstream. Yeah, they kind of shit on him after he displayed wrongthink. Was he a general? I know he was a colonel. Let's talk about anything else. At one point, this psychology guy I don't know what I'm looking at here. I don't know. I think I should stop. I'm going to stop. Thank you. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate you. And good night and good luck. Oh, Brigadier General in the reserves. I think you're right. Okay. Yeah, you probably did hear me say that. Sorry. Yeah, I guess he became a general. He's a brave guy. I like him. And yeah. The end. Thank you. Goodbye. Or good night.